You're listening to the B2C Lead Gen podcast here at Lead Generation World London 2022, and we've got Ryan Bay from Cornerhouse Media joining us again on the show. How are you doing, Ryan?
I am very good, thank you. It's great to speak again.
And you just smashed your speech, you watched it, we really enjoyed it. You're feeling relaxed now?
Yeah, I think, it's a shame that we're in the final hour of the 2 days and I am now enjoying it versus before that thinking I cannot think about anything else other than it's 3 hours to go, it's 2 hours to go as well, but it was good.
Next time, put yourself in first thing Monday morning, get out of the way, you can relax.
Did you have a relaxer before you went on stage?
I didn't. I nearly took your advice with that, but no, water. So, if you have a beer to hand now, that would be great.
No, unfortunately.
Should we bring them out? Hopefully, we did yesterday.
I don't know whether they will.
Good idea.
Right, random podcast title
Random.
time. We'll
Let's
go for
go
the
for a
wild
wild
card
card.
bowl.
Let's
You
do it.
have a little rummage around, pick one.
Fish around, there it is, a little bit of a rustle noise. Prove it's happening.
What you got?
Everyone has been ripped off. Tell us your story. Interesting. So as a lead seller, I'd say everyone has been ripped off. Would possibly be, I'd be looking at this from an advertising standpoint, and I think that historically the lack of transparency, particularly on a display network, native network, non-search basically, anything that's not search or social, and the lack of visibility there was shocking. I remember once we launched a marketing campaign and the ads that we were showing were on, I think they were on a mobile app, and let's say this was a game, and as the level changed to the next one, the button was in exactly the same place to say next as to where the ad would then be inserted. We didn't catch this for days and probably thousands of pounds. So I think, there's a lot, there have been many issues on that side, but I'm sure that lead buyers have their own stories of being ripped off. It's a strange world sometimes, this lead generation.
I think that even as a lead generator can get ripped off by a lead buyer. Well, if they work with the wrong sort of lead buyer. So you'll have some companies that, I think in the past I've worked with companies that have either gone bust, but they've sort of known that they were going to go bust.
Yes.
It's been a problem.
I think that's been a problem, and then I think a lack of, it's not a lack of honesty, maybe a lack of the ethics behind the business side, and not what we're normally thinking, but if you are a company, for example, where you are buying leads, and the product that you have an inflationary rise there with the product that you sell, so every year you put your prices up to the consumer. 4 years later, you still refuse with your lead supplier to pay more for leads. But you are receiving more in line with inflation, which I accept has completely changed over the last few weeks and months. But so there's a little bit of a rip-off there as well.
Yeah, so it's like, well, we were paying £15 4 years ago, now we want to carry on paying £15. It doesn't take into account. It's funny you mention it, it's the same kind of thing with software. It can be quite difficult. If you're like Amazon or Netflix, it's pretty easy. You just send an email and it'll say, oh, by the way, your Netflix account is now $9.99, not $7.99.
I found that fascinating, and I think Spotify really has a problem with this, because when Spotify launched in the UK, what was this, 2008, 9, maybe something like that? $9.99 price point, which was very logical back then. Where is your growth going to come from when you have priced it at the maximum psychological threshold of a single-digit price, if we don't count the 99? The minute you go to £10, everybody is suddenly, well, hang on a minute, this is...
It's into a different realm, isn't it? Yeah.
And I find it interesting that they held off with the price rise until 2020, maybe even last year, I'm not sure. And since then, there have been 2 more price rises, I think. Netflix have done the same thing. Once that psychological barrier is reached, then suddenly there is no reason to not continue putting prices up. So there are so many things to think about around that. And I know that's a deviation from starting off with everybody has been ripped off, but...
We're all sitting here thinking, hold on, why aren't we putting the prices up? Well, I just wanted to ask you quickly, have you had display networks work for lead gen then? So, like it is hit ROI,
yes.
Generating leads?
Yeah.
Do you do it now still, or?
We don't. That is not because it doesn't work. So basically, there are 2 problems for that. What I was talking about in my talk before, of this very siloed view of we only want search leads, or name any other channel at that point. Once you start talking about a more sophisticated model there across multiple areas, multiple channels online, buyers can freak out a little bit. Historically, there was probably a reason for that, but not anymore. So we had to stop doing it, even though it worked. And you segment your data and you show the buyer, you say, look, we are getting a 30% higher lead quality here because the audience was so very relevant. It was working very well. But when the buyer will not be persuaded, what do you do? And I think 2022 for many companies, again, both supply and on the buying side of leads, is now open to this and saying, well, okay, we're not going to silo this, let's look at a wider strategy.
And so do you know the display stuff, is that using the brand's brand, or is that brand's you?
No, our brands.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
The problem with, it's very difficult with Google, specifically if we use their network, for example.
So using GDN.
So GDN, exactly. Very difficult because it's more of a grey area compared to search. If you want to use your lead buyer's brand in search, then from a surveying point of view, you can only have technically one time that brand can show. GDN's a little bit different, but sometimes you really need to go down that route. If the lead supplier has their own strong brand, not necessarily important to use the buyer's brand.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, and also it just further drives the awareness of the brand that's running it rather than.
And this is, there's a little bit of tension perhaps here, because a lead buyer, and rightly so, wants to strengthen their own brand, and often lead buying brands lead buying companies don't have the strongest brand, hence buying leads. So a lead seller, it's very logical to strengthen a lead seller's brand, but then you can have a quality issue at the end once the lead buyer is servicing that lead if nobody has heard of them. So I think there will always be a little bit of tension there until you get to the national brands, until a lead supplier is a national brand. So again, we look at the one of the early talks yesterday morning talking about Lending Tree and All My Bills, same idea.
Bruce Cook, yeah.
Bruce Cook, exactly right. That is when indeed there is only brand value there for the lead seller, but that brand value is so strong it carries through into the buyer as well.
He's called the godfather of lead gen, isn't he, Bruce Cook? But anyone called Cook, I always want to call him the Cookie Monster. Why is he not called that?
I wonder how he would respond if you'd said that. Do you want to respond?
I think there was a hush that happened around the room yesterday when he was talking about their annual turnover. They were all talking about leads, and you hear the B word, not the M word. This is 8 billion. Very impressive, yes.
Yes, good, isn't it? Well, thank you for that. Sorry.
I'm just going to very quickly ask you, actually. Bruce Cook was talking about multiple selling leads, so rather than the exclusive model that we typically have in the UK.
Yeah.
Any brief thoughts on that? 'Cause I'm curious for your take.
I'll answer this in two ways, actually, because it reminds me of another conversation I had later on yesterday. So, I think if it's used in relation to almost like being a comparison site of having calls and the user's completely aware of it. So, for me, you'd have a journey and it'd be like, do you want to have comparative quotes? 3 companies contact you and you could list them even, it'll be, X, Y, and Z, and then they can submit the lead. So I think it's quite good for a user to get those quotes. It can be, it makes speed to lead imperative in some ways, because you can't book a calendar appointment or do anything else, because it's like whoever's...
A lead buyer is always going to be second best there, which is not going to... I think, going back to your first point, perhaps it lends itself again to the data ball ethos that if the consumer's happy, so your hashtag here about being transparent, there are business models that work, having a lead sold multiple times, and business models that will not work. So maybe the reductionist idea of should we sell it once or should we sell it multiple times is not the question. Maybe it's a lot more nuanced.
But there's something else that just reminds me. I had a conversation with I've forgotten his surname, Jamie from Viskia yesterday.
Sutton. Jamie Sutton.
Memory.
For some things.
So we were talking about Viskia and talking about data ball and everything. He said to me, "Oh, do you do ping post?" I was like, "You need to listen to our podcast." Because we said ping post is a scourge of lead gen when it's associated with payday loans, right? So he said, "Yeah, but we do ping post in the US, and it's like car insurance or whatever it was, right?" And I said, "Well, I still have a problem with it." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because what you're doing, ping post could work really well. Like, I think technology-wise, it could be brilliant if rather than when the lead was submitted, it went to 10 different companies and they sent a CPL back, what they actually sent back was an offer, the value that they could give the user. So let's say car insurance at 150, next one's 160, one's 170. So all that happens is the cheapest price goes back to the user.
This is a really good point. If we look at the new models that seem to have come out over here to sell your car, not the We Buy Any Car route, but more the motorway route, I think is the brand, where dealerships are bidding for, they say, well, we'll buy your car for this, we'll buy it for a little bit more, and so on. An old-fashioned, more lead generation 1.0 view would be, let's sell this lead to 5 dealerships, they will contact the consumer and they will give them an offer, and it takes a long time. If immediately they are pinged back with, right, these are the 5 offers from 5 dealerships.
Imagine how good that would be. So imagine, right, what would happen.
So this is the next Cornerhouse Media project, by the way.
Yeah. Well, no, because I think you could do it now, because the key is with ping post is the buyer side has to have the technology to be able to do real-time bidding. Right? Yeah. So if you have an API call, let's imagine that you could actually, I mean, we all know payday loans is disgusting, but let's say it happened anyway, because you have some desperate people and they wanted payday loans. So the thing went off, and the ping post came back, and it listed the interest rates from the 10 bidders, and it was like one was 20% and 25, 28. So the person who is a lead would just always, like, why would they not pick the lowest unless there was something wrong with the brand? And I think this feeds into the fact of how lead generators need to think about being a brand. You know, the value that they can offer people that are their customer effectively. So if you switch your mindset, we were just talking to Luke Ashworth about this, from your customer being the buyer to being the person that visited your site, the only thing you would use ping post for is to offer them basically a comparison site. And if ping post could do that in any vertical, you could do it in everything. You could do it in energy, you could do it in broadband, you could do it in mobile, you could do it really commercial stuff, all financial services. Ping post everyone, all send an offer back. Here are the prices from these companies, Mr. Customer, choose the best one for you.
This becomes a natural evolution then of what lead generation is. This idea of a lead being sold effectively blind, and then the thank you page and so on, this model that we all know and understand. I prefer the model that you have just said. I think this sounds wonderful.
And all this is, you've got to remember, comparison sites are effectively lead generation brands.
I've been saying this for a long time, and I think my argument to companies about, again, not having an arbitrage view, but having a more of a brand standpoint is, ultimately, if we are all very honest, your Go Compares of the world have already done this, proved this, validated that the model works. There, of course, is room for more brands like that, and maybe, as you were saying to me yesterday, go very, very niche. Go Compare went very wide, but of course you do the same logic going very niche. Consumer wins, buyer wins.
Well, I think you can go broad, but you need to spend a lot of money doing it.
You can definitely go broad, and again, if the turnover is back to Bruce Cook's turnover, then we'll do that every day of the week.
Yeah, but the what's amazing about stuff like the comparison sites you just mentioned is, in some respects, they're bigger than the brands which are their customers.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredible. And also, again, some of the psychology behind that. A very good mate of mine, it was actually his wife, and car insurance or home insurance, something that they were doing at the time. I was explaining to them the idea of cashback and various comparison sites and very simply other ways of doing things. My friend was absolutely adamant. She did not care what the price was. She did not want a voucher code or cashback or anything. She wanted a meerkat. This meerkat that I'm quite sure is made in China for 70 pence. She was happy to pay more for her insurance, and that is the power of that brand.
Yeah.
I have no idea which insurer she went with. She doesn't care which insurer she went with. She got the meerkat, and that's a lesson for everybody.
Yeah, for me, that's almost how lead generators need to think about their brands.
Yes.
Because that's effectively what lead generators are. They are a brand servicing another brand. It's the same model. Yeah. That's been brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Simon.
I can't remember where we started with that.
That was a great tangent.
Wildly off piece, but basically classic podcast. Nice one. Cheers, Ryan.
Very welcome. Thank you.